like the money. So you can work it out, really, can't you? I think there are other Labour MPs, like Caroline Flint, who seems very pro the idea. John Mann, Bassetlaw, again, a former coal mining area that perhaps has not had a great few years, and he thinks it's a great idea. He thinks, look, this is a chance for a Brexit voting area to get some money. Others, less impressed. Shadow Communities Minister Andrew Gwynn said that MPs would be disappointed and patronised by their communities being offered less than the government had already cut. But hey, there's an offer of money on the table. But is it just an act of political bribery? Well, let's have a look at some of the numbers, shall we? So 281 million of this would go to the North West, where there are 54 Labour MPs and 20 Conservative MPs. And the smallest sum of money going to an English region would be 25 million, and that would go to the east of England, where the Tories hold 50 seats and Labour hold 7. You know, you have not got to be a mathematical genius to work out what is going on here. Is this an act of political bribery being used by Mrs May to get her Brexit deal through? I think the answer is pretty obvious. That's exactly what it is. That's what governments do, and particularly one that's in as much trouble as she is. So tell me, do you believe, as I do, that it's an act of bribery? And if you think, yep, it really is pretty much an abusive position and an abuse of taxpayers' money, tell me that on 0345 6060 973. Or maybe you think, no, come on, these areas have had a bad time. It makes sense in many ways for them to receive this money. And some of the cuts to local government funding have been pretty horrible over the course of the last 9 years. Well, you can text to 84850 and tell me, if you were a Labour MP in a Leave voting area, what would you do? Would you like the promise of some money for your area in return to vote for the withdrawal deal? Please tweet using the hashtag Farage and LBC at LBC, and of course Facebookers, you can comment there too. Let's ask Phil, who's a new caller from Sleaford. Hi, Phil.
Good evening, Nigel, and thank you for all you've done. And my point here is very, very simple, and it's just that this is a sign of how it could be if we take back control, giving back our money to our communities ourselves and making decisions ourselves, as you and I wanted us to do when we voted to leave the European Union, Nigel.
Yes, absolutely, Phil. I mean, you know, what I didn't vote for was for us to give away £39 billion in a withdrawal agreement that promises absolutely zero for the future. So, no, I get that, Phil. Not giving away the money, spending it here, absolutely. But she's so desperate to get this withdrawal agreement through. You know, does it make sense for Labour MPs to say, yep, we're going to go with that and back Mrs May's deal?
Well, I think those MPs need to realise that the fact that at the end of the day, when we leave the European Union, which we will do eventually, as you and I know, it will happen over time, that this is the ability to control where we place our funds within our local communities to make our country bigger, better and stronger out of the European Union.
Phil, I completely understand the point. Do you view Mrs May's withdrawal agreement as the way that you want to leave the European Union?
Nigel, there are 50 errors in that withdrawal agreement.
Only 50? Phil, I'm with you. No deal's better than a bad deal, but that's a slightly separate debate. But thank you. You make a very good point. Martin is a new caller from Southend-on-Sea, and Martin, your part of the country is going to get the smallest amount of money.
Oh, hi, Nigel. It's nice speaking to you.
Good to speak to you. So,
all it is that I'm quite young. I'm 35. And obviously, I know I've always voted Conservatives, and I've never, ever voted Labour, because all I think of Labour is people who sit on their butts, doesn't work, and all they care about is immigrants. That's all Labour think about.
What, is this Labour MPs, Martin?
Yeah, all of them. It doesn't matter what you are. I grew up in Coventry, and I always got taught, if you want to get something in your life, you go and work for it. And the way that people are doing it with these Labour, basically, all these people up north have been told that if you vote Labour, we'll get you all this money, we'll get you this. And basically, what it is, they sell their soul for this, just to get this bit of money.
But actually, Martin, this isn't Labour MPs selling their soul. It's Mrs May, isn't it? I mean, she's the one selling out here, isn't she, really?
But listen to me, where do I go, right? I voted Conservatives 3 times. They've all stood on the manifest to say that they're going to leave Europe. We're not leaving Europe. Everyone keeps talking about businesses, right? My second biggest purchase in the world is a car, right?
Yep.
So I spent £30,000 within 3 years on the car. Right? The car companies are worth, what we import is £136 billion worth of cars. Everyone goes just-in-time car parts. Oh, yeah, just-in-time. We export £9 billion worth of parts. How do they need us more than we need them?
Martin, I understand I get all of those arguments, absolutely and completely. But do you want Mrs May's withdrawal agreement to go through Parliament?
I want to leave with no deal. When
Okay.
you look at it, they think we got a bad expenses. You want to look at what they do in Europe. The more I've been watching, more I've been looking into what these people do, is unbelievable what they get away with. They're unelected bureaucrats who just cane our money.
I know.
Take it.
And Martin, as
It
somebody...
makes me so angry to think, where do I go? Where's
Martin,
my next vote going?
if Mrs May gets her wretched deal through Parliament by, as I see it, bribing Labour MPs...
That's what they're doing. They're bribing.
That could really damage the Conservative Party, couldn't it, in terms of its vote?
But there's no one. Who can you vote for? There's no one to vote for now. You've got Conservatives. What no one wants to. We're living in a democracy, but no one wants to take part in it. The Remainers are the worst people. They say people like me. I go and work, pay my taxes all my life since I was 16. Basically, I'm a racist. I'm this and that. Well, where do I go?
Yeah, well, Martin, Martin, don't forget one thing. You're also very stupid, all right, as I am too.
Yeah.
As I am too. Martin, I've got to move on. So, our Prime Minister, a vicar's daughter, indulges in bribery, the church doing what it does. Nigel, Lisa Nandy is a hypocrite. 63% of Wigan voted to leave. It's shut-up money. May hasn't got a clue, says Paul from Cornwall. Well, I don't know. I wonder what Gary from Ipswich thinks. Again, Gary, the east of England not getting much of this money.
I'm the same as that geezer. I want to leave without no deal. And Theresa May, she sold her soul a long time ago. She's definitely doing the double on us. She's turning us over something rotten at the moment. But the northern people will be wiser than this. They'll see this as a bribe and what it is. Now, if she'd have said, we're going to cancel HS2 and rebuild the railways in the
Gary,
north
I'm with
first,
you. I'm with you.
Wouldn't they have said, we can see something concrete, we can actually see jobs being created?
Yeah, and make sure, Gary, and make sure broadband worked all over the north of England. Yeah, I'm not against investment in the north of England at all,
No.
But I agree with you. I think scrapping HS2 would be a great way to do it. But what does she... I mean, if she was to get this deal through next week, and to do it with Labour support, having made this offer of £1.6 billion, that would do the Conservative Party huge damage in the longer term, wouldn't it?
I think so. I think the Conservative Party are as split as the Labour Party at the moment, and we're coming to a phase in politics where there could be so many different factions fighting against each other within that nothing will get done. And we, the people that are paying the money to support these people to live and work in luxury in London, we're not getting value for money.
I think the feeling of what's going on in London, I think out there in the country, increasingly, London is not liked, at least not London in terms of the people, but in terms of our rulers. Gary, I thank you. Angela on Facebook says, of course it's bribery. Does Theresa May think we are stupid not to think otherwise? Well, probably. And an anonymous text I get, please feel free to pass on my telephone number to Mrs May if she's giving money away. I'll have some thanks. You're listening to The Nigel Farage Show here on LBC, and it's now 6:15 and time for the news headlines.
Conversation. The Nigel Farage Show. Tweet at LBC using the hashtag Farage on LBC.
Now, one of the reasons that Theresa May is probably going to need some Labour votes, and that's why she's offering the £1.6 billion over the course of the next 4 years to predominantly Labour voting leave areas in the country, is she has got a few difficulties inside her own party. Of course, there is the ERG group, but there's well over 100 Tory MPs voted against the withdrawal agreement when it was first put before Parliament. So what are her prospects like with the Tories and the ERG? And joining me to assess this is Theo Usherwood, LBC's political political editor. Theo, there was some talk ahead of the weekend that Jacob Rees-Mogg and the ERG were perhaps softening towards the withdrawal agreement?
That's quite right, and they are softening towards the withdrawal agreement. Their demands are suitably vague. They talk about the need for a mechanism in order to ensure that the UK could leave the backstop, which of course has been the thorny issue that has prevented this deal passing through the House of Commons until now. But they're very vague. It is not specific, and that is good news for Theresa May, and it's good news for the Attorney General, Geoffrey Cox, who travels to Brussels tomorrow with Stephen Barclay, the Brexit Secretary, and he needs to get something out of Brussels, and we're looking at an independent arbitration panel when it comes to ending the backstop between the UK and the European Union that would be able to pass muster with the ERG and the DUP. Now, I say the two of them together. They're actually now working together, and what would be acceptable to the ERG, we would assume would be acceptable to the DUP. Where Downing Street is a bit unclear, and this is where it gets interesting, is that if Geoffrey Cox comes back with something, it is likely to go before a star chamber of the ERG and the DUP for them to approve first. And then Theresa May knows she has a deal, and she would put that to the House of Commons. But she must get the ERG and the DUP on side before she brings it back to the House of Commons, which would be next Tuesday at the latest.
I was going to say, it doesn't have to be as late as next Tuesday, does it? If she thought she could...
If she's going to get a deal, she will bring it. If she thinks she could get it through, the thinking is she would
it could happen this
try
Thursday,
and
could it,
sign it off very, very quickly. Absolutely. Right. They're not going to hang about. If there's a deal to be done sooner rather than later, they'll do it sooner rather than let anybody bring up any concerns that they might have.
But what I have been hearing from Nigel Dodds, who's the DUP leader in the House of Commons, and Jacob Rees-Mogg, the leader of the ERG, all the way through this, and indeed Graham Brady with the amendment, of course, that passed and gave her the ability to go back and renegotiate. They've all said the same thing, that there has to be a legally binding deal. And Geoffrey Cox is now talking about looking for an arbitration panel. How are they the same thing?
Well, the arbitration panel would be legally upheld within the document. So it would be a codicil, it would be an add-on to the withdrawal agreement, and that would become the mechanism by which Britain could go to the European Union. They could work together and say, listen, the backstop isn't working, we need to bring this to an end. Both sides are looking for a way, and I say the Prime Minister and the Eurosceptics and the DUP are looking for a way out of this, because they know if they don't get a deal through on March the 12th, then it's in all likelihood there wouldn't be a majority in the House of Commons for a no-deal Brexit, and we're looking at an extension to Article 50.
So I
guess
there's
a realisation within the ERG that they simply just don't want that to happen. Now, the question is, Nigel, there will be those within Jacob Rees-Mogg's group who simply won't support this deal as it stands. I'm thinking of people like Peter Bone, the MP for Wellingborough, one of those. I don't suspect Andrew Leward, Northamptonshire Conservative MP. He would support it, or Andrew Rossendale, the
or
Tory
Andrew Jenkins.
Or Andrew Jenkins.
Yeah.
There's going to be a really small, well, it could be fairly big, but there's going to be a group of hardline Conservative Brexiters who are not going to support this. And the question for the Prime Minister is, can she get enough Labour MPs from Leave constituencies on side to offset that difference? Now, as soon as she thinks she's got those numbers in place, John Mann is talking on the Labour side, as many as 35 Labour MPs could come on board, then she will go to the House of Commons and put it to a vote. But that is what she needs, and that's what her Chief Whip and her Chief of Staff, Gavin Barwell, needs to achieve.
I wonder, with this arbitration panel, you know, if half of them are British representatives and half of them are EU representatives, who's going to be the chair and who's going to have the casting vote? I mean, that to me seems to be the key to this now.
Absolutely, and Bill Cash, who is, of course, is now becoming increasingly important. He is the Conservative MP for Stone and is chairing this star chamber. He's the one who is going to effectively sign off on this deal for the Brexiters. Now, if he signs it off, then one would assume Jacob Rees-Mogg, Steve Baker will order the ERG, will whip them into line to support the deal. But, and this is another but, it's also about personalities, and there is a feeling growing within the ERG is that Theresa May isn't the person to lead the Conservative Party, to lead the government on to the next stage of Brexit. If they could get somebody in post, and this would mean, of course, Theresa May setting out her timetable to leave as Prime Minister sometime over the summer in time for the party conference in September, October, then that would provide a way of saying, well, we could get somebody who is a bit more, a bit more to our way of thinking.
Promise me Mrs May's going to resign and I might vote for the deal.
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. Theo, thank you very much. Well, there we are. Geoffrey Cox off to Brussels tomorrow. It'd be fascinating to see what he comes back with. To me, the idea of an arbitration panel doesn't really strike me as being the same thing as a legally binding way that we can get out of the backstop unilaterally, but we will see what happens. But Theo making it clear that without Labour votes, this doesn't go through. And that, of course, folks, that's why she's offering 1.6 billion. It's an act of political bribery. Tell me that I'm wrong. I'm going to go to James in Nottingham. James, good evening.
Good evening, Nigel. How are you?
I am well. So, would Labour voting areas in the East Midlands, where some of this money will be going, would it make sense, James, for those Labour MPs to say, do you know what, I'm going to vote for the deal and take the money?
It is very nice to agree with you on one occasion, and I totally agree with you that would be the case. There are a number of sort of Labour MPs whose constituencies voted to leave, and so this is the best way to push them towards Theresa May's deal.
Right, and is it an act of political bribery?
Yes, it is. What I find totally fascinating is for someone who works in the NHS, is to see the years of austerity, the sort of mental health services be crippled, especially for sort of children who I work with. To see my local sort of Sure Start centres sort of be affected, and sort of, services closed down, and then this is offered. And I'm just flabbergasted, because when I meet my local MP or other MPs, I ask about sort of, well, I thought we were all in it together. So how come people have got much richer, and how come people, because I work in the West Midlands in one of the poorest sort of areas in the West Midlands, and I see the sort of people talking about food banks and stuff, and basically, I'm just gobsmacked that we're not asking about, well, I thought we were all in together, so why are people getting richer?
James, how would you respond to this? I've just received a text from Leo in Norfolk who says, if only Theresa May was to keep our bribery money in the bank, leave with no deal, and then put 39 billion into the NHS, the Tories would stay in power for years to come.
Right, well, that's where you and I begin to separate, Nigel, because as we know, 39 sort of billion, well, my question is, well, where will all the money come from? My question would be basically, would we be seeing the break of the UK? With
that's a separate question. That's a separate question, James. Obviously, but I mean, the point Leo's making is that if we leave on WTO terms, we will not. I mean, basically, the reason she's paying all this money is because we're effectively staying members for another 2 or 3 years. That's really why she's doing it, isn't she? But are you tempted by that argument, James, or do you think it's a false argument that by leaving the EU there is more money free for the NHS, which you care so much about?
Okay, we're for the NHS. But as you know, Nigel, I'm going to be separating our viewpoints, basically. My concern is that if we go under WTO rules, people don't even know that Liechtenstein and Argentina will all basically argue about our rules and schedules regarding who we trade with. The USA did it. They objected. Argentina did it. So I implore people, read about the WTO. Don't just assume it, go and read about it.
Well, it's a basis for rules, isn't it? And on top of that, you can do trade deals on top of it. You can do what you want on top of it. There's no system, James, that's perfect. But hey, there's a growing number of people. James, thank you. I sense a very large, growing number of people who say, do you know what? The hell with this. Let's just leave. But Mrs May knows. I think in her heart, she doesn't want us to leave with no deal. I wish she did. But Mrs May knows that she needs Labour votes to get her deal through next Tuesday, or perhaps even before. That's why she's paid the 1.6 billion. It is an act of political bribery. Tell me I'm wrong. 0345 6060 973. You're listening to the Nigel Farage Show here on
LBC, the Nigel Farage Show.
Mrs May's going to need some Labour votes next week. Maybe that's why 1.6 billion's been promised over the next 4 years to Labour leave areas. But before I get back to that, hardly a week goes by, and it depends on the weather, of course. If we get big southwesterly gales up the channel, we don't get it. But as soon as it's calm, there are dinghies appearing on the beach at Dymchurch and Dungeness. There are people being taken into the port of Dover. There's a report of 11 migrants being found in the back of a lorry in Ashford the other day. I mean, what on earth is going on? Because it seems to me that this story that was perhaps dominating the news before Christmas has kind of slipped down the agenda, yet I think it's still going on. And to help us with this is the Conservative Member of Parliament for Dover, Charlie Elphicke. Charlie, good evening.
Good evening.
What's going on, Charlie? Please tell us.
So what we have is a situation with mainly Iranian migrants in Calais trying to get into Britain, and they use small craft, small little dinghies that they go and buy, and then they literally just motor across the channel with a bit of guidance from the people traffickers they've paid tens of thousands of pounds to help them in this effort.
And how many of them do you think we actually pick up, and how many get in unnoticed?
That is an impossible question to answer. I mean, clearly, there have been several hundred that have arrived, and the traffickers tell them to report to the authorities because they know that because they're from Iran, they're not going to get returned. So they can simply claim asylum and they will get it. What I've been saying is we actually need to stop these people leaving the coast of France, and if they're found in the middle of the channel, we should help them carefully and safely back to France.
But are they really Iranian? I mean, do they have Iranian passports, or do they just claim to be Iranian?
No one quite knows that. I've been asking the Home Office to identify what nationality they all are, because sometimes the Home Office tell me that they are Iraqi or Syrian. And I think proving nationality is a really important part of this, because anyone could just claim to be from anywhere in order to get asylum so they can live in Britain.
But there's something wrong about this, isn't there? I mean, the Geneva Convention on Refugee Status, and we're going right back to the early 1950s, states very clearly that you claim refugee status, you claim asylum in the first safe country you get to. And unless we think France is now an unsafe country, surely what we should be doing is saying to people, if you come by these means, we will send you straight back to France. Isn't that really the answer?
Well, I think the real answer is they ought to be claiming asylum in Italy or Greece or Spain, or wherever they come to first of all. By the time they've got to France, they've come through several countries. And for migrant charities, we say they're fleeing terrible conditions. I don't think that France is that bad. I think France is a perfectly good country, and one where they ought to be claiming asylum and not risking their lives in very dangerous journeys across the Channel, because if we don't put a stop to this sooner or later, there's going to be a horrendous tragedy in the middle of the English Channel. Yeah. That's why we've got to bring a stop to this.
Yeah. No, Charlie, thank you very much indeed. Well, that was Charlie Elphicke explaining to us the scale of the problem. Hundreds have arrived. They say they're all from Iran. Because of that, they're allowed to claim asylum in this country. We don't need to be doing this, but we are. Back to, are Labour indulging in an act of political bribery? Well, I really do think they are. What does Tristram in the Isle of Man think? Good evening, Tristram.
Good evening, Nigel. It may be bribery, but in the great scheme of things, I don't think it's a huge amount of money, and I don't think it's going to change anybody's votes, because I think feelings are too strong. So they'll take the money and then vote as they wish. My take on it. What worries me is that they are going to try and introduce some softened position on the backstop, because there is only one certainty in this game that I can pin down, and that is that if the withdrawal deal gets voted through, the EU will trigger the backstop and will split the country. Because if you look on Google Earth closely at the Irish border, it is totally porous. It goes through farms.
Of course.
You'll be able to, farmer will be able to buy fertiliser in the north and then drive south and spray the fertiliser in the south. That's breached the single market. So the EU, if you look at it from their point of view, are going to want regulatory alignment in the island of Ireland. That's their bottom line, because they want the integrity of the single market. I can see their point of view. I don't care about them. That's the point. So they're going to trigger the backstop, and all this talk about codicils or arbitration.
Yeah, I mean, you can predict that, but of course that all depends whether the deal goes through. And you're right, part of that is what does Geoffrey Cox get in Brussels. But actually, Tristram, I would say this to you. If you were a Labour MP representing an area that had voted by over 60% to leave, that had really had quite hard times recently. The idea that you vote for her deal and the area gets money, it is bribery, but it's quite tempting, isn't it, if you are that Labour MP?
Yeah, but there's no conditions on it. The money's gone through. It doesn't affect it. The money's gone through. There's no conditions on it. It's not a contract.
No, but it's tempting, I think. That's my feeling, Tristan. Thank you. I'm going to go to Oxford and speak to Tim. Hi, Tim.
Yes, hi. Well, I think it's interesting that everybody thinks it's a bribe.
Yeah.
I don't think it is at all. It's a compensation payment, and I tweeted this a couple of weeks ago. If you're going to pay a bribe, you'd pay it to somebody like Nicky Morgan to say all your constituents who don't want Brexit and think it's going to be so awful, well, hey, they think they're going to be poor, we'll give them some money. But why would you bribe, people in Leave constituencies who want it? Presumably, if these people voted Brexit, they want to leave. This is just a payoff, Nigel, because basically the people in Leave constituencies, they're either going to get Brino or they're going to get Remain. And she's sweetening them up now so that when this is all over, she can go to sleep saying, well, we gave them a second referendum and actually we gave them some money, those poor people who were left behind.
But, Tim, this is about Labour MPs, right? This is not about constituents. It's about Labour MPs.
Yeah, no, it's about Labour MPs
who are being told, hang on, who are being told by their party to vote against Mrs May's deal, and the money is being offered to help them change their minds and vote for the deal. And that, I think, does qualify as political bribery.
Well, it does, but the logic I'm making, Nigel, is why wouldn't you bribe a Labour MP in a Remain seat? Because those people presumably really want to remain, so if they're going to leave, you might as well give them a bit of compensation.
I think because, Tim, the vast majority of Labour MPs are going to vote against Mrs May's agreement, and she can't get it through without getting some on side. We'll see. I'm going to Manchester to speak to Omar, a new caller. Good evening, Omar.
Good evening, you all right? I just wanted to say, mate, that just on what she's offering, it's nothing, mate. Like, just Manchester alone has been cut by 1.7 billion, and she's offering 1.6 to the country over, 6 years or whatever it is. And I think it's absolutely stupid. But what gets me more, mate, is, and with all due respect to yourself, I think it's so easy for you to be able to sit on the sidelines and, moan, which you've made a bit of a career out of.
Oh, no, Omar. I haven't moaned. No, far from it, matey. I've been for 25 years standing in elections all over the country. The last thing I've done is moaned. I'm one of the very, very few people you will ever speak to or meet who did the opposite of moaning, got up, formed a brand new political movement. That isn't moaning, Omar.
Well, the moment that you achieved your political movement, Steve, you abdicated your responsibility like the rest of them and just blocked the shit like right.
Omar, I'm leading a group in the European Parliament. I've got to take part in the final vote on this deal, just as MPs are next Tuesday.
You know that we're leaving. If you're a national figure back here, why aren't you trying to get to a position of power where you can actually lead the movement you've created?
Because, Omar, I'm not in politics for a career. I never was. I'm in politics to try and change the country. I believe Brexit was the biggest, most fundamental change of the country. And I must admit, when 498 MPs, Omar, voted for Article 50, which said we will leave on March the 29th, with or without a deal, I did actually think we'd won.
Yeah, but you did you really think that we're not going to trigger Article 50 after the country?
No. We did trigger Article 50, and it passed by a massive majority of 384. I perhaps underestimated the sheer level of dishonesty that exists in British politics, having promised the public they would take us out, and now we're faced with a withdrawal agreement that I think looks more like a surrender document.
In some of that dishonesty, though.
Sorry?
You're a part of a political process that I'll go back to again, you moan about, but then you can distance yourself from just because you're an LBC presenter now.
Omar, as I say, Omar, I'm a group leader in the European Parliament. You can look up my speeches. The last one got 8 million views on YouTube. If that for you... It
sounds popular but not realistic.
Well, I tell you what's realistic. Leaving a failing, corrupt European structure that's going to fall to pieces anyway. Omar, we can take a different view, but I tell you what, you can't say I haven't exactly put myself in the front lines to fight this battle, because I have over many, many years. You're listening to The Nigel Farage Show.
LBC, call 0345 6060 973.
Here's the 1.6 billion for predominantly Labour Leave areas. Is it an act of bribery. And what does that mean? If she was to get this deal through with Labour votes, having made this promise, what would that mean for the Conservatives? And Tony from Staines has a view that I think many Conservative supporters and voters would come to. He says May's act of bribery aimed at Labour MPs to get support for her shocking deal is an act of stupidity. As a Tory voter of 40 years, I can never support a party that depends on opposition votes to pass government policy. And Tony, you're right, this is potentially very divisive. Jan from Durham is very sceptical. Will Theresa May actually pay her promised bribes? She's lied and lied and lied about everything else. Ronnie says on Facebook she's very good at giving away our money. David Edwards from Hereford says bribery, more like culpable misfeasance. When she next recites the Lord's Prayer, she should linger over the words, forgive us our trespasses. Well, there you are, lots of strong views on this. Yvonne is calling from Luton. Is this, Yvonne, an act of bribery with our money?
Oh, big time. Yeah, definitely a big bribery. Thing is, if I was up, a voter up north in one of those big Labour things, and if that councillor accepted one of those bribes, I certainly would never vote for them again, because to accept the pittance, to just bribe to be in that trap, I would never vote for that person again. Never.
But then, Yvonne, if you were a Labour MP and if your constituency had voted to leave and you were able to say, I've not only, by voting for this deal, supported the vote, but supported the vote that you made, but I've brought some money into the area. I mean, and then if the Tories didn't deliver it, you could come back at the next election. I mean, I can see why it's quite tempting for some MPs.
Yeah, but no. If they've got to listen to their people that are going to vote them in next time, haven't they? And they certainly won't be voted in next time if they accepted that bribe, whatever. Because it's only going to be a pittance in comparison to the 39 billion and everything. And let's face it, Theresa May, I mean, I don't know, the ERG, I wouldn't, if I was them, I wouldn't trust Theresa May to even step down. I would have to get that legally binding as well.
Well, and this is what's being talked about. This is what's being talked about. Come on, old boy, the whip says, vote for the deal. She'll stand down in the summer. We'll get a true lever to lead us into the next stage of the process. And as you say, how could you trust her to do so? Yep, Yvonne, I take the points. Thank you very much indeed. It's not bribery for votes. It's money for areas wrecked by Labour councils, is one opinion that I get. How can it be lawful to have a vote, then to have a bad deal negotiated by a Remainer, and then for people to say, this is how it... Well, Tony, look, there are lots of ways of looking at this, but I just think this is a bribe. It looks to be a huge sum of money. In reality, actually, it isn't a huge sum of money, but it still looks like bribery. She can't win this next week without Labour votes. That is perfectly clear. Whatever Geoffrey Cox gets tomorrow in Brussels. Jane is calling from Hatfield in Hertfordshire. Good evening, Jane.
Good evening. Thank you for taking my call.
Not a bit.
And there was a long time, up until just a few weeks ago, I was actually feeling sorry for the lady. And
yeah, a lot of people did, didn't they?
With what I know now, with the past couple of last elections, I voted Conservative negatively, but what I know now, I should have voted UKIP, and I'm not just saying that because I'm speaking to you as a person now, but it is a bribe, and I can see now why, and it just looks so, completely corrupt, it does to me. What has she been promised? Has she been promised a great big pension pot, golden pension pot that's so huge?
Jane, come on. I mean, look, I've been pretty critical of this Prime Minister. I've said she's the worst Prime Minister I've seen in my lifetime and the most duplicitous, but I don't think she's doing this for a great big pension pot. Honestly, Jane, I think she and her husband are pretty comfortably off. There wouldn't be any incentive for that. But you said, very interesting, when you said that you felt sorry for her. I've had lots of callers over the last 6-9 months saying, look, she's doing her best, she's trying really hard, and we feel sorry for the way she's being treated. But I sense that sympathy has gone with you.
Oh, definitely. I mean, I'll never vote for Conservative ever again. I'm hoping that UKIP or another party, a party that's fair-minded like you. I mean, even when that guy was sort of being pretty horrid. You're so nice. You were so nice.
Oh, was I? Oh, gosh. I tell you what, Jane, this is not on. I must get a bit nastier. I really must. No, actually, Jane, I do believe that we can have very strong differences of opinion and still be pretty civilised about it. We can tease each other, but we need to be civilised and not sink to the sewer. Jane, I thank you. I'm going to go to Cork in Ireland and speak to David. David, hello.
Hi, Nigel. How's things?
I am okay. Now, pork barrel politics, and, we've seen lots of it. We've seen lots of it in Northern Ireland over the years, that's for certain. That is absolutely for certain. Is it an act of bribery, or
yeah, 1,000,000%, just a final act of desperation that we've witnessed over the last few months, with endless press conferences on the steps of 10 Downing Street, promising X, Y and Z and delivering nothing. She is an embarrassment to Britain. She really is. She's beyond pathetic at this stage. It's just like bribe, anything she can do.
But David, she's trying to get her withdrawal agreement through, because I heard her the other day say it takes back control of our laws, our borders, and our money.
Yeah, we've had this chat before.
I know, and she thinks we're going to believe it. It is absolutely astonishing, isn't it?
Yeah, it's painful. It really
and what's your sense of it, David? I mean, do you think she's going to get this deal through next week, or?
No, I don't. I think it's going to be kicked down the road. I know you've been speaking about this for a while, that Article 50 is going to be extended. I think that's what's going to happen.
I have to say, I've been predicting since last August that I thought that's what was going to happen. It's not what I want to happen, of course. I mean, I very much hope that we will leave now on WTO terms, and even if there are a few short-term bumps in the road, and maybe we still will, David, I don't know. But, David, thank you very much indeed for your call. Craig on Facebook says she won't pay it. She'll be gone soon. She doesn't keep her promises. And Paul's really angry. No money for anything, but May soon finds money for bribes. How many laws do they all break? They are corrupt, spineless. Freeze their bank accounts immediately. Enough is enough. Some of you really very, very angry about this. Nigel, didn't Jeremy Corbyn try and bribe youngsters, saying he'd waiver their student loans? Yes, Leo, he did try and do that, and then they found out it was going to cost about 100 billion and decided they'd simply call the whole thing off. Well, one thing for certain, she cannot get this vote through, whether it's next Tuesday or before. She will not get it through without quite a lot of Labour MPs voting for it. And if they can say to their constituents, we've got you more money, maybe they will, maybe they won't. But I do believe it's bribery. I'll be back tomorrow at 6. At 10 tonight, it's Tom Swarbrick, but up next, it's Ian Dale.
Nigel, thank you very much. We are going to lead our news hour on the issue of knife crime, as you might imagine, and